work in this organization or to work, but all the organizations that you are seeking to work in are squares, but you are a triangle and there's no changing you. You fake being a square. And I'll say that's encouraged because it is not being discouraged. So you come in and you wear your mask, you perform, and everybody's happy with your performance. Shall we let the bishop?
Bishop, would you like to come through? Welcome.
Hi. Hello, Karina.
We'd like to welcome you, Bishop Malusi. We gave your apologies in advance before you arrived, so you have been forgiven.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. I've been given some power, which I don't have. Yes, is your mic okay?
I'm just going to hold on to it.
You'll just hold on to
it.
it.
It just keeps
okay.
unclipping itself, and I'm not sure why. It's a square.
It's a square, not a triangle.
To a triangle.
Okay. We're still on the first question, Bishop, so we'll turn to you once we've finished with you.
Thank you.
But in the meantime, you did mention Clause 9 of the Constitution. Not all of us are from South Africa, so we're not too sure which other groups you were referring to. So,
okay.
Yeah.
In Clause 9 of the Constitution, I'm really going to be smart in the presence of Edwin, yes. It's the equality clause.
Okay.
I mean, that's amongst other things, it prohibits unfair discrimination on the basis of race, gender, ethnicity, culture. Sexual orientation certainly is there amongst a whole list of categories.
Okay.
I was talking about leadership as authenticity.
Yes.
So if you want to be an organization that is successful, you've got to take everybody with you who is in your organization and be attractive to people who are outside of the organization looking to see whether they would like to be in that organization as your prospective employees. So certainly within Anglo-American, we talk about come as you are, because it talks exactly to the authenticity, to being real. Because if you are a triangle adds richness to a whole range of shapes that are there. And when we've started having these conversations about authenticity and diversity and all of that, and celebrating pride. So around this season, we do a rara as well, in recognition of the fact that there are people who are raraing out there, but with the flavor of creating awareness. And highlighting where the challenges are. So the issues of when we are not enjoying full constitutional fruits, so to speak. So the benefits that are embedded in our constitution have not been fully realized. So the challenges that are still there on the ground, where people are still getting harassed, people still getting killed, it might be so distant to people who are not living that life. And how do you bring it close to them and make it real? So that we are not seen, certainly I don't want to be seen as this one exception. There are so many of us. And we live in our families, we live in our communities, we work in the spaces in which we work. We are full members of society, but we've got to show up in our full authenticity for that enjoyment to be complete. And to the extent that we are editing, whether it's a self-editing, because I mean it's safe, when you don't know what the consequences are going to be, to show up in a mask and keep your job, get that bonus, get that raise, and be desperately unhappy. It's the hollowness that comes with that. Because you spend a third of your working life in this corporate space. And if that 1/3 is spent in a lie, in you leaving a backpack at the door of you inside, and you go in there with the face of the square, it's not good enough. But there's a long way to go. I mean, mining, I could list the schedule of backlogs that we have. So LGBTI is amongst them. And I can tell you now, within the mining industry, that's a conversation that's not even happening. Because we've got this backlog of race, gender, all of these priorities. And when you show up with LGBTI, it's like, oh, Lindy, that can wait. My challenge is that we are already there. So when you talk about creating spaces and the recognition, it's not about preparing space for people of the future. I'm talking about, I'm here. Can I wear my men's clothes, please? Because I'm tired of having just 2 days in the week called Saturday and Sunday to really enjoy me. Monday to Friday, I've got to moderate and be as close as possible to the square. It's not sustainable. So I like the fact that where I work, I can show up as I am. But then there's all these things in mining called retrenchments. So please pray for me. Because if I lose my job at Anglo, I might work for this really square company that looks at me and thinks, aren't you too old for this? Because they also think, by the way, it's a generational thing. It's fashion, you know.
Okay.
It's a young thing. So you've got to stop this now and get that power suit like, you know, your lady ministers wear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bishop, the question which we've posed here is, what can your sector do to advance the rights and well-being of gender non-conforming people?
What can my sector do? I think my sector is the one that denies the most. For all kinds of biblical considerations. 2 weeks ago, I ran into someone at the airport, of all places, and I don't know the person, but he saw me wearing a dog collar and thought maybe he should talk to me about this, and said, can I ask you a question? I said, yeah, by all means. I'm supposed to talk to a group of people about gay rights. What do you think I should say? So what do you think you should say? He says, well, I don't want to be judgmental, but at the same time, I don't want to say anything that's against the Bible. So I say, okay, what is against the Bible? He says, well, the Bible says you may not have homosexual relationships. I say, what else does the Bible say? He says, about what? I said, well, I'll give you a few examples. The Bible says whoever has been caught in adultery must be stoned to death. How many stonings have you observed in your lifetime? And the Bible says women must not talk in church. Would you say that to your grandmother? So he says, well, I think I got it. I say, have a good day. A friend of mine who lives in the United States, he's a South African. He has come back and forth over time. We would do certain things together on various projects we've worked on. And then his wife died, and he had not visited South Africa for 4 or 5 years since then. And when he came to visit, we spent some time together, and I was saying to him, you know, how are the children doing? I sort of talked about his daughters, whom I know. He said, well, Malusi, if you had asked me this question 3 years ago, I wouldn't have known what to say. I said, why? Because my daughter so-and-so married another woman, and I did not know what to think of this. And so what happened? He says, well, my priest who married them helped me. So how did your priest help you? He says, well, my priest pointed out that, and I won't hazard the numbers because I don't remember them, that there are, let's just say for argument's sake, there are 30 verses in the Bible that say something about homosexuals or against homosexuality, and that there are 100 verses that say something against making money through interest. And yet, all the churches make their money through interest. Nobody says it's sinful. I guess I don't really have an answer for your question, except to say that that my sector is a sector that tends to live with whatever is current. Give you an example. The greatest of the apostles in terms of mission is St. Paul. And the rest of the world pretty much owes its faith to the work of this great apostle, Paul. Very enlightened man, smart guy. But even Paul says, at one point he says, slaves must be faithful to their slave masters. And you ask yourself, does Paul actually promote slavery? And then the same Paul writes to a slave owner named Philemon. And he says, I've met your slave who escaped and was arrested for escaping and spent some time with me in prison. I'm here in prison, but he's going home. And I've urged him to go back to you, even though he is your slave, to come and offer his loyalty. But you know what? I'm writing to you to instruct you as your father in God, not to receive me as a slave, but as a brother. So you see that he is saying on the one hand, slaves must be faithful, because he's in a context where slavery is an acceptable thing. And yet he is saying in that context, slave owners must cease to be slave owners. He says women must be obedient to their husbands. And then he says husbands must love their wives. And I suspect it's much more demanding to love than it is to be obedient. Because he says they must love as Christ has loved. Now, Christ has loved by dying for the church, for the world. And in a way, the call of love is a call of surrendering oneself and one's own freedom for the sake of the other. And I suspect that is a much higher call than simply to be obedient. So I want to say that my sector remains a sector of a message that is clearly calling on a progressive mindset about what is good, because it is based on the principle of love. And love is, as defined, self-giving and self-sacrificial. That's the ultimate message. Jesus says, the greatest law is love God with everything you are and love your neighbor as yourself. And that is the ultimate message of the gospel of my sector. But at the same time, that sector is steeped in human reality, a human reality that is informed by cultural and social milieu that has its own dynamics, particularly, as I say, in terms of what people's practices and experiences that they have assumed for themselves. I have had to deal with